Section 12 is going to focus on data analysis using a spreadsheet application. Now, there are several vendors and several different spreadsheet applications out there. We're going to use OpenOffice Calc, but Microsoft Excel is probably more popular, but OpenOffice Calc is free. And so I just want to make sure that whoever's taking this course has the option of at least using some kind of spreadsheet application in order to perform the skills in this section. So this is actually a fairly lengthy section. There's a lot of information in here. So just take your time going through it. We're going to look at the vendors of spreadsheets first of all. Talk a little bit about data entry. Look at some basic skills like sort and filter. And then we're going to go into something a little more advanced, a little more intermediate, and that is data manipulation using formulas and other techniques. Finally, we'll move on to using our data once we have it in the format that we need to do some charting, and we'll end up with looking at pivot tables. In this section, we're also going to do an exercise of building a calculator, a loan calculator, so that you really learn how to use formulas and how to reference different cells. So I think this is a really good section. This will, again, take you a little bit of time to get through, but take your time going through it because it'll be very valuable in building up your skill set, especially with data manipulation. Before jumping into the functionality of a spreadsheet, I thought it'd be important to point out some of the different spreadsheet applications that are available, because if you don't have Microsoft Excel, there's several free alternatives. In this course, we're going to use Apache OpenOffice Calc. So these are just some of the spreadsheets that you could use. There's Excel, there's an online Google Docs Sheets, which is very good. There's these OpenOffice and LibreOffice Calc and NeoOffice Calc. Those are all based off of Apache's OpenOffice. And finally, if you have a Mac, you could use Numbers, although Numbers doesn't have the functionality of building pivot tables, but all the other functionality would be there. So this is just a quick overview of some of the spreadsheet applications that you could use. To enter data into a spreadsheet application, there's a couple of approaches. You could first manually enter in the data, or second, you could import the data. So to import the data, you need to open up the application. So in this case, I'm in Windows. I'm going to hit the Start button and type in Calc. It will provide a suggestion here of OpenOffice Calc. That's the application I want, so I open it. Okay, so to import a file, I hit File, Open, and here you see the different file types I could choose. If you click on all files, you see right here is a CSV. So if I chose that file format, then I could just navigate to where the file resided and then open it like any other file. But for now, we're just going to do some manual data entry. So let's say I had a column heading here of ID and I type 1, 2, 3. Now, one time-saving feature of spreadsheets is to auto-populate. So if you highlight the pattern and click and hold the little box down there and drag it, it will auto increment based on whatever numbers you had. So if this was 2, 4, 6, it would increment by 2. Okay, so that would just be a time-saving feature, and if you had a date, it would work pretty much the same way. If it recognizes it as a date and you click and drag, it will auto-increment the days. Okay, not only can you auto-increment dates and numbers, but you can auto-increment formulas, and the formulas will be based on relative positions. So let's say we had a length here, we'll call it feet, and a width, call it feet, and then we want to find the area. Be square feet. Okay, let's just auto-populate this again too. So we have on the first column we have the length and the width. Now the area is going to be the length times the width. So we put an equal sign, and what we can do here is type in A2 times B2. And what we see here is A2, let me save that formula first. Okay, so what we see is up here is the formula. This cell is set to A2 times B2, and that gives us the product here. We can click and drag that, and now we see that that formula gets copied down, and it's relative to the row. So here it's A2 times B2, here it's A3 times B3, here it's A4 times B4, and so on. So even though the cell value shows, say, an 8, it's really behind the scenes made up of this formula. Now there's ways we can lock parts of this formula. So if we wanted to lock the column to A, then we could do that. If we wanted to lock, let's actually go up here. If we wanted to lock the column to, say, A2, we could put a $sign in front. Now the $sign will lock the column in this case and the row in this case. So wherever you put a $sign, it's going to lock either that column or row. So now if we copy down the formula, it's going to be relative. B2 will change to B3 on down, but it's all going to refer back to A2 because we've locked that cell. And when we click and drag the formula, now we see things have changed. So now in this cell here, we see that it's B11 times A2 because we locked the formula on A2. This will become a lot more apparent in the next exercise. We're going to go through an extensive exercise which will help you see and play with some of these different features. And again, a lot of these will be big time savers when you want to create your own spreadsheet. So next we'll go through an exercise. In this exercise, we're going to be building a car loan calculator. This exercise takes a little while to do, maybe 15 minutes, so please be patient, but I think it's a great exercise for learning a lot of different skills that have to do with spreadsheet applications. So if you're using Microsoft Office products, you can open Excel, or if you're using OpenOffice Calc, open up Calc. I have Calc opened, so let me just go to that right here. Okay, now we're building a loan calculator, there's a few terms that you should be aware of. So we're going to be dealing with percentage rates, amount borrowed, and the length of the loan. So those are just a few things to be aware of. We need all those components in order to build out our formula. So first of all, let's go down to cell A10, and we're going to be entering in some percentage rates. And we'll do some formatting later, so type in 0.05, hit enter, and then 0.06 and enter, and 0.07 and enter. And as you see, it just goes to the next cell down. So once you do that, go ahead and we're going to use the auto populate to copy a pattern. So we have 5, 6, 7 and go all the way down to row 20. So the last interest rate should be 0.15. Go ahead and right click and format the cells, and we want to choose the numbers tab here, and these are percentages. 2 decimal places is fine, and then hit OK. So now we have our percentage rates here. At the top you can type in APR to show that this is an annual percentage rate. Now when let me put a tick mark. It thinks I'm trying to do a shortcut for a month. Okay. So this is based on an annual percentage rate, but our loan calculator needs to base it on a monthly interest rate. So what we're going to do is take this value and divide by 12. So if you want, you can type in MPR here. So this is annual percentage rate, this is monthly. So what we're going to do is take this interest rate and divide by 12. So the formula we need here is just equals, and then we're going to choose cell A10. So just type A10 divided by 12 and then hit enter. Now in the lower right we can select that and drag it all the way down. And here we're going to have the formula just copy and do the calculation for us automatically. Once again, with all these cells selected, right click, format cell, and go to percent. And 2 decimal places is already selected, so that's okay. So now we have our monthly percentage rate. Okay, now we need to enter in the amount borrowed. So in cell C9, make sure up here, C9, type in 10,000. And you can use the tab to go to the next cell over and type in 15,000. And then 20,000. And once again, we will highlight these and drag them across to column H so that the last value is 35,000. Now with these rows still selected, right click, format cells, go to currency this time. This time it's the amount that we're borrowing. We don't want any decimals, so let's get rid of the decimal places and hit OK. So now we have the interest rate, we have the amount borrowed, and just quickly let's go ahead and bold these. So if we highlight them and hit the bold button, highlight, and you can hit the bold button up here, or just do Control B for bold and it will bold it. So that will just kind of frame all of the payments that we're going to calculate here. So this is where the payments are going to be calculated, but we need one more piece of information, which is the length of the loan, or the total payment periods. So up here, let's go to A4 and we'll just type in total payment periods and then parentheses TPP, and right below it just type in 60. So we are going to assume that the length of our loan is going to be 5 years. So 5 years times 12 is 60 months. So this is really, the length of the loan is 60 months. Okay, now we're going to calculate the payments. So we want to come down here to C10. In C10 we're going to type in the formula. So give me a second here and I'll type that in. When you're done typing in the formula, hit enter and you'll see the result here. So one thing to notice is you'll see a number here and you'll see the formula up here. Now this is not necessarily formatted the way we would want it because this is a dollar amount. So what it's saying here is if we took out a $10,000 loan for 60 months at 5% annual percentage rate, we would be paying $188 per month for the car we bought. This formula is based on B10, which is right here, the monthly percentage rate. It's based on C9, the amount we borrowed. It's based on, well, B10 again, and then A5. So those are the 3 components. Let's go ahead and bold that so it's a little more clear. Now I could copy this formula. What's going to happen is all these numbers and letters are going to change relative to where I populate, or where I drag, and it'll auto-populate and make things relative. But in this case, that's really not what I want, because I want this value always to be this value, and I want this value to always be this value when I go down, but not across. And I want this value to be the same when I go across, but not down. So that's a little bit confusing, but what I'm going to do now is put the $sign in places where I want the formula to be locked. So let's go ahead and do that now before I copy it. Well, actually, let me copy it down so you can see that there'll be an error or be something that we don't want. So what happens is here we can see the formula. That's what we typed in. Now when we copied it, this value here, A5, which is our number of months, when we copied it straight down without locking anything, it changed to A6. Well, it's not really what we want. We want it to stay at A5. So let's put in some dollar signs to lock things. So we want to lock. So B10, we want this to change. We want this to change as it goes down, but not across. So if we're on this row, we always want this interest rate to be the same. If we're in this column, we always want this value to be the same. So for B10, we lock the column. For C9, we lock the row. And then B10, again, we lock the column. For A5, we lock the row and the column, or the column and the row, because we don't ever want this to be changed. So we put a dollar sign in front of the column and the row. Now we hit return, and we have, this doesn't really change because it's the same as it was, but now when we copy the formula down, copies relative the way we wanted it to. So like I said, when we copy down, we want the interest rate to change, but we don't want this C9 value, we don't want to change. We want it to always be C9 within this column. When we're in this column, we want it to be D9. But for now, let's just look at here. So here we have B10, which is fine because that's the interest rate. When we go down one, we want it to be B11. And sure enough, that's what we have in B12 and 13. So you can see the B value change. Now let's highlight all of these and copy the formula across. And in these cases, we want this value, C9, which is our dollar amount. We want that to change as we go across, but we don't want the interest rate to change because we're still on this row. So as we go across, you'll see B10 all the way across, but you'll see C9 change to C10. We'll see it change to D9, E9. It's confusing. Let's see here, we are D9, E9. So now our column is changing because we want it to be relative to the amount, but our interest rate stays the same as B10. Okay, so let's see. I think that's about it. We can definitely clean this up a little bit. So this is a little bit messy. So let's highlight everything and we'll format the cells to be currency without any decimals. And now what we have is a pretty nice chart of what it would cost us if we wanted to buy a car. First of all, the bank would tell us, well, you can borrow the car, but or you can buy the car and we'll loan you the money, but it's going to be 8% APR, annual percentage rate. So if you know that you're going to borrow the car for 60 months or for 5 years, then you could say, well, I've got a $300 budget, so what's that tell you? You can buy a car that's about $15,000. But what if you said, well, what if I got a 36-month loan? Well, you can just change the length of the loan up here, and you'll see all these calculate. So now you say you have $300. Now you can't, if the interest rate is 8%, you might be able to swing it, but you'd only be able to afford a $10,000 car in this instance. So depending on your financial situation, you can determine how much of a car you can buy based on the annual percentage rate and how long you would plan to take the loan out for. Now we'll talk about importing data. And so we've already seen how we can get a data set in a CSV file. We can go out to the internet and download it, or we can generate it ourselves. In this case, I went out to this website out here and just clicked on this link here to download the demographic statistics. And if I go out to my folder structure and go to my downloads directory, I can see right up here that that's the file I want. So now to import it, I can open up a spreadsheet, and I have Calc open already. If I do File, Open, Then I'm going to go to my download directory. I can sort this by date modified so that the most recent one shows up, and here is the file I want, the CSV file. This is what I downloaded from the internet. So I select the file, click open, and it knows it's a comma separated file, but you may have to specifically tell it how it's separated. So it's not by semicolon, it's by colon, by comma. Okay, so now when you click on comma, you tell it how the data is separated. You can see that it falls into nice columns here with the rows of data. So once you identify how that file is structured, you can click OK, and all that data is now at your disposal and you can work with it. A couple of very useful features in spreadsheet applications are the sort and filter features. The sort feature gives us a really powerful way of finding minimum and maximum values if the column happens to be a numeric value, or we can easily identify any kind of word that we want if it's sorted in alphabetical order. From a filter standpoint, that allows us to hide or temporarily hide rows of data so that we have a smaller data set to look at. Now for this section, I went out to data.gov and downloaded a fairly big CSV file. If you go down to the topics and down to show more topics and opportunity, there's a file out there that deals with colleges. It's about 4 meg. So I've already downloaded this and imported it into my spreadsheet. And here's the file. So there's a lot of data. There's over 7,000 rows, quite a few columns, and this just gives some statistics for all kinds of stuff, ACT and SAT scores, and I guess you'd have to look at the description to understand all of these fields, but really we're going to concentrate really on the university name or the institution name, the state abbreviation, and the city. So let's say you want to go to college in a particular location, and let's say you wanted to go to school in the state of Washington. Well, first of all, what we could do is click on the column and go up to data and filter and choose the auto filter, and then you can click this down arrow, go down to Washington or the abbreviation for Washington, and now you can sort maybe by city. So if we click over here and then do data sort, and we want to go ascending, now our data set is much smaller. We're only looking at schools in Washington, and we can scroll quickly to whatever city we're interested in to find what schools are there. We could alternatively use the filter to reduce that even more. So if we wanted, say, Seattle, we would just go down and select Seattle. Now this shows us all schools in Seattle, Washington. And now if we want to sort again by the institute, we could select in this column, go up to data, sort, and choose. In this case it didn't select it for us, so we might have to go here and select OK, and then once it's done sorting, okay, see, now it's easy to identify whatever college we're looking for because it's in alphabetical order, and it's been, the whole data set over 7,000 rows has been reduced to probably around 20 rows of data, and they all pertain to Seattle, Washington. So this is, again, a really good way to take a big data set and whittle it down to just what you want to focus on. So you will use these two features, the sort and filter feature, quite a bit.